y'all, it's Joyce with Friends Drift In. Today we're going to do a kind of a part 2 on homesteading in Appalachia and what it's like to think about what we're going to do in the spring. And here we go.
For old-fashioned recipes and your gardening needs, while sipping on Kentucky bourbon. You sit right back in your big red hat, we're taking rural back from the urban. Listen to the stories where Kentucky is proud, share the giggles with all of your friends. You're all tuned in to Friends Drift In.
Good morning. It's Joyce.
It's Charlie.
It's Friends Drift In, episode 15.
Wow, 15.
Can you believe that? Today, before we get started, I want to reach out and thank all of our friends and new friends that came out to see us at the show last weekend in Lexington down at Manchester Music Hall.
Appreciate everybody coming out.
The cash infusion was sure welcome. This is the time of year when farmers kind of, it's all the money is going out and not much coming in. So anytime we get a cash infusion, it's really helpful. I want to thank the people that are our loyal listeners that are here. Thank you for your orders through our website. We're really appreciative, and we're looking forward to rolling out some new things soon if the state ever gets going. Today we're going to talk a little bit about homesteading. This is kind of part 2. We've talked about homesteading once before, but we're going to be talking about homesteading a lot because that's what we do.
We talked about homesteading before on beginning your homestead. Well, you've probably been on your homestead for a little while now. Now you got to think about every spring. Last year you got all the basics, you were overwhelmed, and now you got to start thinking about what am I going to do next? So what crops am I going to plant? What equipment what can I do to upgrade from what I started off with?
So one of the things that new homesteaders tend to do is they are eager and they plant too much. It is much better to plant a little bit and do it well than to plant so much that you can't keep up. Because if you can't keep up, you just get discouraged and it's hot and you get tired, and it's not just because you got to think when you plant it, you're not just planting it. You got to hoe it, cultivate it, water it, nurture it, protect it, whatever you need to do. Then you got to pick it when it does come into time of the harvest.
Yep.
And after you get it harvested, then you got to get it prepped either to sell at the market, or you've got to get it prepped for your canning or preserving. So let's start with beans, because y'all know we are the bean people. And I cannot stress this enough. If you know how much beans that you need for your family and how much you need for market, then kind of divide that up. Because beans can be planted here in 6B where we are in Kentucky, Appalachia. Usually the regular bush beans run about 55 days.
That would be your earliest bean that you could have, and those would be really good if you're a market person. You can have those ready to sell quickly.
That would be like Contender, Black Valentine, some of those. But the thing is, if they're 55-day beans, don't forget that you don't have to plant all your beans at once. You can plant them in manageable runs. That way, when you're canning, especially with the beans, you got a pressure can. And that is hard work, y'all. So 55 days, and we've got almost 120-day growing season. So you could conceivably plant every 2 weeks and have a constant supply to eat fresh, to can, and for market.
That's the thing you got to look at, especially, because the contender beans and those 55-day beans, those are really beans you'd want to freeze. They don't can well. But if you want to do like the white half runners, the other heritage green beans to can, if you plant 1 or 2 rows now, wait 2 weeks, plant a couple more rows, especially if you're a small family, like it's just us, it's 3 of us, me and Joyce and our nephew Jacob, and we can probably handle Mama. But we can probably handle about 6 rows at a time. And what we do is we plant 6 rows, we wait 2 weeks, plant 6 rows of another variety and then another variety. That way, when we're constantly picking and we're constantly canning, but we're not overwhelmed.
We do it at a pace that I can keep up with. So with beans, you know, you got your 55-day bush beans maturities, but you've also got your pole beans.
Pole beans are in the 60, 70
60
day
to
range.
70 day range. And the thing you need to think about when you're doing pole beans is that you're going to get a heavier yield.
Yes.
You know, pole beans yield a lot heavier than bush beans. You know, you could go down those rows and just grab them by the handfuls if it's a good year. And this should be a good year. This should be a good year.
With the pole beans, you know, they're going to keep producing until frost. The first flush will be the biggest. And you know, so sometimes what we do is we plant different varieties, and we'll do like 2, maybe 3 pickings off each variety, then pull those up, and then plant another late season crop in behind them.
Yep. But let's take a minute to talk about the canning situation. Because spring now, you've got a little time before you're going to start canning. You know, it'll be June probably before you're really into canning mode in a serious way. What's the situation, Charlie?
Well, the situation's still with the pandemic. Everybody's still behind on production, so getting jars, lids, and rings has been a little bit tougher. You know, we picked up a few extra jars here and there, but
for our home
canning. You know, we can still buy our commercial jars, but the home canning people are in the same boat. You know, but if you see taps, lids and rings, we call them taps.
We call them taps.
But lids and rings out there, buy them up now, because if you wait till the canning season, which you're going to be lucky you can find them now. We've been able to pick them up. We bought a couple of cases of lids. We've got plenty of rings. We've got plenty of jars because we've been canning for a long time. And most homesteaders and and have all those old jars, but you know, eventually you're going to have to replace some of those jars. So we try to buy a few every year because over time, you know, it happens. We'll break 2 or 3 jars a year, especially in the pressure canning. You always want to use your newer jars into pressure canning because they're not as, you know, the older they get a little bit weaker.
Yeah. So, you know, with jars and lids, you know, it used to be how that I did it to keep my budget straight was every time I went to the grocery store, I'd pick up a couple packs of lids. You know, I didn't need to be worried about whether they were going to be on the shelves or not. They were going to be on the shelves. We just had a big shipment come into our food city, last week?
Right.
Last week, and before I could get there, they were gone, y'all. All the lids were gone. And I noticed this week they had an aisle out where they had canning jars. And used to be you'd buy a flat canning jar, it's about $8 or $9. And that would be the jar with the lid and the ring. You want to guess what they were this week? I'm
going to guess $12 to $15.
They were right at $11.95, I believe is what they were for a flat of 12. So they have gone up significantly. That's almost $4 or $5, $3 to $4 over the last year. And if you see them and you need them, you better get them.
And that's true because what's going to happen, you don't want to have to buy them off the black market because there are a lot of people that go out there and they'll buy them up in bulk. I've seen them go and buy the Rural King last year. They were buying pallets at a time, and then they were taking them back to the flea market and raising the price, so you ended up paying more for them.
Right, because they were reselling. But you need to check out, and you need to check out now. You know, what do you need to be doing your canning in June, because it's just the prices are going up for one, so you can get it a little bit cheaper. You know, that cuts your cost. And then 2, you just might not be able to get it. So you need to look for a jar lifter for sure, which is, you know, a jar lifter helps you pull them out. You need to have a water bath canner with a basket in it. And you need, you know, at least one, you know, depending on how big your family is. We run 2 or 3 at a time. Yeah. And pressure canning. You know, pressure canning, the difference between water bath and pressure canning. Water bath is usually for jams, jellies, tomatoes, anything that's already high acid. And then low acid for pressure canning, which would be like meats, soups,
potatoes, beans, soups, anything like that. Anything other than fruits and like tomatoes, which are high or more high acid. Yeah. So
you need to be getting your equipment together. Now, out on the farm, when you think of homesteading in the spring, it's getting your equipment in working order if you haven't got it. We're still at that point,
Nope,
Charlie.
tractor's up and running, we're good to go. We apologize, we had the flooding issue, so I have really good friends, some help mechanic, and we took that tractor down, we drained everything out of it, we replaced it all, and being a diesel, it started right up after we found out the battery terminals were not, the battery was corroded, but once we got that fixed, everything's running tip top. We started mowing. We'll get some pictures in the next show on what we're doing. We're going to be doing some mowing, cleaning up, and starting to plow and get ready to start to plant some stuff soon. And I know we're a little bit late. We've had a late week. We're still this is Friday. We're expecting a possible frost tonight.
April 30th.
April 30th. So we're 15 days past the official frost date.
So we're kind of being cautious, and again, when you are homesteading to sell at the farmer's market, you're on a schedule, and you need to be thinking, and you need to have it down on paper, and you need to set your goals, and this is what I have to have, this is what I have to have, and you have to be really strict. It's just like when I go shopping, when I'm just starting, I have to shop for everything when I'm trying to get my prepper pantry going. But after I get my pantry pretty well up and running, then I can kind of pick and choose and do it at my leisure and use the sales. So planning is really important, but you don't need to kill yourself.
No, we've been able to do, like I said, we do some stuff over the winter time. Like we tried to get the greenhouse or the high tunnel ready to go. We were a little lax this year because we had some personal issues in the fall and just going through all the other mess everybody's going through. But we're up and running. We got tomatoes in there. We should see blooms on tomatoes here in the next few weeks. And we could show you around. We've got tomatoes and peppers sitting here that are ready to be transplanted here in the next week or so. So we're going to have it up and running and doing really well here soon.
Yeah. When we talk about homesteading and relocating, if you're relocating to a new place, a place that you are not known. Charlie mentioned, hey, we got a buddy that can help us work on our tractor. It is really important to network. Being a homesteader doesn't mean that you have to do it all by yourself and you have to do everything just perfectly the first couple of years. You're not going to be able to do it. And crazy things are going to happen. You're going to have a tractor go down and you're not going to know how to fix it. You're going to have some crazy bug on your plants and not know how to fix it. So you need to figure out how you are going to network within the community. And when you're coming to Appalachia, it's hard. I mean, I've been there. I've done that. Charlie's family been here forever, and of course we found out eventually that my family started here. But it's not always easy to make friends. You got to show yourself friendly, and two, you need to get involved. Whether that be church, whether that be an extension group, whether that be something that the library is doing, involvement with the schools if you've got kids. But you need to know who your neighbors are, who you can call when you're in trouble, and let them know that when they're in trouble, they can call on you.
It's always a two-way street. My buddy Sean is a mechanic. We're farmers. They got questions about farming, they call us. We got questions about our equipment or our vehicles, we call them. We've got friends that are into we're blessed to have friends that do a lot of things. We've got a friend that's a veterinarian, we can call her in emergencies. So those are the things you got to cultivate. But the first thing you got to do is you've got to show that you're friendly and outgoing. If you're walking over there and your neighbor's working on his fence or something, walk over to him and say, hey, you just offer to help.
You'll learn something.
You'll
either learn something about the community,
yep,
or you'll learn something about the whole, how do you string a fence line? How do you string a fence line?
And believe it or not, there's different ways to do fencing in different parts of the country. You do it here, it's a lot different doing it in Texas or Oklahoma where it's flat. There's big differences on how to get things and what kind of fencing to use. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about you've got to become one with the people you're at. And I know most people think that when you become a prepper, you're going to crawl in a hole in the wall and just disappear. Well, there's a lot of other people out there that are like-minded that you can band together with in situations where you need help. And I think that's part of it. That's part of life.
What the preppers would call the mutual assistance group. And you got to kind of think who you can count on, who you can trust, and trying to make it totally on your own is a hard, lonely road. And it's just not, if you're gonna come out here to homestead, you don't need to be miserable. You need to make it fun.
Yep.
And you need to make it profitable, and you need to make it fulfilling. Those are, depending on what your goals are. But, at the end of the day, when we've struggled to get our little tomatoes from seeds to plants, so we get the plants in, and that's all great and wonderful. But at the end of the day, when you reach out and you grab that big red tomato and you pull it from the vine and say, I grew this.
Things you can do, some of the things we talked about before, but storage problems are always an issue. Everybody needs a freezer. Everybody needs refrigeration. They need canning. Something that you really need that we grew up with is we call them a root cellar here. And you got to find some different ways to store.
It keeps a constant temperature,
cooler constant temperature. We're blessed here in the mountains. You can dig a hole back into the mountain, build you a structure, cover it back up with dirt. And we called it a can house, we called it a root cellar, whatever. I grew up with an old, I don't know how many of you are old enough to know what the WPA is, the Work Progress Administration, I think it was.
Something under Roosevelt.
Yeah, under Roosevelt, but they came in and they built a lot of structures. Well, they hired the Italian stonemasons in this area, and we've got buildings built out of cut stone that are great. Well, our can house is half buried in the ground, and it's built out of 6-inch stone with a 4-inch slab of concrete poured on the top of it. And my sister has that now. She got the old home place.
Home place, yeah.
But that place stays a constant temperature. We built shelves in it. We were able to store. You can store your potatoes. You can store cabbage for a long time. You can store winter squash. You can store a lot of stuff in there because it's got the right humidity and it's got the right temperature to make stuff last for a long time. And that's the whole point of growing all these. Like all that kind of stuff, so that it will last longer. You can do your pickling in there. We used to do those in old crocks and cover them up with cloth and let them do the natural fermentation pickling. So there's a lot of things you can do that will give you more stuff other than just canning and freezing.
One of the ways, when you're a new homesteader and you've located and it's spring and you're thinking about, all right, this is what I need to get together to get the season going. Watch for farm auctions, which is something that we have a big time at farm auctions. Things that you can find at auctions that people collect and put on the shelves.
The cabinet you're looking at behind us.
That came from an auction.
Yeah.
Our Hoosier cabinet. Crocks. When you're looking for crocks, because crocks, y'all, if you can't find them in your community and you've got to order them in, the shipping is going to kill you, because they're big and heavy. And you use crocks especially for pickling and fermenting. Things that I always look for jars.
Jars, yeah.
I always look for jars. I'm always looking for any kind of kitchen gadgets. Cast iron. What do you call it? Not really a mandolin, but it's that same one. What the old-fashioned cabbage cutter.
Kraut chopper.
Kraut chopper is what we call it. Looks a lot like a mandolin. It's got the blade on it. But that type of thing, always looking for the old-timey items.
Like cast iron, like she's talking, cast iron is kin to the crocks in the same way. When you go buy it, it's very expensive, and if you have to have it shipped in, the shipping expense is what's ridiculous.
You up.
An old cast iron is easy. You take an old piece of cast iron, you throw it in your oven, you run it on, you've got especially a self-cleaning oven, close it up, put the self-cleaning oven on it, walk away from it. When it cools down, take it, wipe it out real good, cover it with oil, put it back in a 400-degree oven for about an hour or two until all that re-seasons it. You got basically a brand new piece of cast iron.
Most of them are not. It depends on
most
the
of
shape
them are not that
of
kind
them.
of shape.
I mean, there's lots of YouTube internet and YouTube videos on how to reclaim the cast iron. As long as it doesn't have a hole in it, you can probably make it work. And cast iron cooking, the advantages is such an even heat. And if you're a bean person, cooking beans in an old iron pot, a cast iron pot is just the way it's done, especially if you're outside. Outside cooking beans, especially down in the fall, is kind kind of a social event, almost. Our friend Donald always does beans down in the fall and invites us over, and we have a big bean dinner.
Got a big tripod and a big pot hangs over the open fire, and it's a social event. She's exactly right. But now we use a lot of cast iron. We've got 2 or 3 different kinds. We've got regular cast iron, and we've got a lot of enameled cast iron. And that's, if you're in a hurry, that's real easy to clean.
Yeah.
I use that for the stuff that I wouldn't put in my regular cast iron.
He's picky about his cast iron, y'all, and one of the things that he's really picky about is
Don't
there's
mess
only
with my
one
bread pans.
skillet. There's only one skillet that we make cornbread in.
That's right.
And if I touch that and mess that up, buddy, I have to walk the walk of shame.
Hey, cast iron, if you treat it right for baking breads, cornbread, and biscuits, if you treat it right, it's almost...
It's forever.
Yeah.
It's an heirloom. It's going to be, if it's not an heirloom now, it's going to be an heirloom for those that come after you.
And if you treat it right, it's like Teflon. It doesn't stick. That's the reason I use 1 pan for cornbread and 1 pan for biscuits. Those 2 are not to be used for anything else, because when they seasoned out, they've almost become non-stick. But there's a lot of different things. But I will say that really goes back to my Appalachian raising. My mama, I don't think we had much of anything that wasn't cast iron that we cooked with.
So, options. When you're looking, I talked about kitchen gadgets, but what kind of farm implements? Obviously tractors and those type of implements. But what about small hand tools, Charlie?
Let me tell you, the old-fashioned hand tools, the old hoes and all that are made of much better material. It's hard to find it. We're going to do the show on tools one day, but it's hard to find a good hoe. You go to like True Value, Lowe's, or Ace Hardware, and you buy these new hoes, and they're thick, heavy metal, and they don't cut well, they don't work well. If you can find the old-fashioned hoes, they're made out of really high-quality steel. They're thin, they're easy to keep sharp. I carry a sharpener with me all the time. Every time we start working,
Sharpen your hoe
before you
so
start.
much easier.
And those are hard to sharpen because they're so thick.
The new ones are hard.
Yeah.
Newer ones, and we do have a couple of places that we bought some new ones that are really high quality. But if you're on a budget, going to an auction is a lot of fun. Take you some comfortable shoes and make sure you've got it's usually an all-day event. You want to make sure you probably want to take you a director's chair or some kind of lawn chair for when they're bidding on stuff that you're not interested in. But an auction really gives you a lot of options on your budget.
Yes.
And because of the spirit of community, and you get to meet a lot of people. If you're friendly, you get to meet a lot of people, and you make connections. So, people are, oh, well, that's the new guy that's homesteading, and maybe they won't bid against you, or maybe they will.
The nice thing about going, if you're handy, good with your hands, you can get some really good deals, and you can get more. You may not be able to use them forever, but it's something that you can use long enough to get yourself through.
So we've talked about getting your equipment together for canning and looking for jars. Get them while you can.
Right.
We've talked about going to a county auctions and getting equipment. We talked a little bit about the hand tools like hoes and shovels and that type of thing. We really didn't talk about implements.
Farm implements, a lot of them are, they're forever. Like a disc, a plow. There are not a lot of moving parts to them. They're good and solid. If you can go find something that's good and solid. Plastic layers, they've got more working parts to them. Anything that doesn't have an engine on it is really, they'll last for a long time in a lot of places. A lot of guys just quit farming. They've been setting out there for years. Like a disc, most of the only thing you have to do is replace a couple of the cutters on it or grease it up, and it should be ready to go. And a plow, those 2 bottom plows, they're nothing but solid irons. You can buy those sometimes pretty reasonable, and that's a lot cheaper than you can buy them as brand new implements. And that's the way to get started. To me, that's what we've done. We bought a few new pieces. We bought new plastic layer. We bought new tillers, because those are the things that, can go wrong. You can buy used walk-behind rototillers as well, because it's just about cheaper to put an engine on one of those than it is to buy a new one. And if you put an engine on it, you've basically got a new tiller.
Right. So, new homesteaders, spring of the year. think about how that your summer is supposed to play out. Think about, all right, I got to block this time to do canning. I got to block this time to do harvesting. Block some time in there that you've got a few days that are for you.
Yeah.
For you. It is all too easy, especially in those first years of homesteading, to just be so focused on getting it done, that you neglect your family. I mean, you're doing it for your family, but you're really neglecting that quality time. And kids aren't kids forever.
Yeah.
Your wife or your husband or your significant other, they ain't gonna be with you forever either. So take some time to enjoy them.
And you can burn yourself out too. You got to look at that. You're a human being. You need interaction. You need downtime. I know that there's always something you can be doing because we're that way right now. We're working 7 days a week, but we try to sit down and have dinner together every night. Especially since the pandemic, that also gave you a big wake-up call on family time, because you've had a chance to do more family time because a lot of your other activities have been curtailed. So that's one of the things you got to look at, and I agree 100% that you need to have that family time.
When you're a homesteader, you're going to be working 24/7, not really 24/7, but you're gonna have to work 7 days a week. It's not always hard labor, you try to take your time for yourself, and if you have religious convictions, that you take time to connect with the Creator, or what your thoughts are on that. But if you've got livestock, they got to be watered every day. They got to be fed every day. If you've got plants that are in a high tunnel, they got to be watered every day. You got to go down and check them and make sure they're not getting ate up by a pest, or some critter has broken through your fencing and got into your high tunnel. One of the most important things I think about homesteading, especially for new folks, is, and I've said it and I'll say it again and again, is don't bite off more than you can chew. Set realistic goals. That first year, get your soil in shape, do a small garden. Don't feel ashamed if I've got to go to the grocery store, I've failed. Well, that's not so. And don't be too proud to go to the farmer's market. Especially those first couple of years, you might meet somebody down there that ends up being a lifetime friend.
That's true. That's
And especially if you get some of the old timers, they're not threatened by you as a new person, and it depends on the person. But you might find somebody down there that will help you mentor you. And it may be your goal just to grow for your family, or it may be your goal that you want to get in with the farmer's market. And if you get down there and you buy a little bit of produce here and there and just talk to people, you're going to establish yourself in the community. And that gives you a step up if you want to join the farmers market, because a lot of farmers markets you can't just show up, you got to go through a lot of training. And that also gives you, if you're not familiar with the region and the growing climate, that kind of gives you the perspective of people that have been there and done that.
Well, if you're new, the first thing you'll do is go to the farmer's market, because you'll see what normally is grown in that area, because that's what they're going to be selling.
And you could scope it again. That's kind of market research, but
Yep.
it's also networking and learning your community. You can't just assume that because you're farming that you can sell at the farmer's market. You can't assume just because that you can sell your canned goods and still be in the good graces of our government. The amount of paperwork and classes that you have to take to be in compliance is mind-boggling.
Yes.
And it's gonna continue to get more intense. Traceability factors, they don't want to know just not only that it came from your field, but what road did it come from? They don't want to know that it came just from your field, but did you set 6 foot apart from where you found where a deer had been? They don't want to know that it just came from your field, but what kind of manure did you use and when did you apply it? And are you in compliance with that? And do you have a compost pile and manure pile? And at what date did you start that and how long has it been working? I mean, the amount of regulations, now we're small and we kind of fall a little bit under that, but we have taken all the training because we were on that. Before the pandemic, we were on that, now we're trying to get back up to where we were. But there's a lot of work with traceability.
Yes.
There's a lot of work with how that produce has to be prepared for market. It has to be washed. How does it have to be washed? 3-bin sink. You know, if you're doing eggs, well, it has to, you have to have them a certain way and in new cartons. And I mean, every state is different. Kentucky is one of the strictest states in the nation from all that I can gather. So you need to, to find out how these regulations apply to you. Home canning, if you're selling it, there's regulations there, Extension is a great resource for that. That's probably your first place to go. If they can't give you a clear answer, you can always move up to your Department of Agriculture, wherever your Department of Agriculture can be. We're blessed with a good Department of Agriculture, and they always try to be helpful and not only give you the information you need, but they also are really good about saying, hey, well, so-and-so is doing this in this county, why don't you give them a call? And that's really helpful because even though, we're in one county, we talk to people from across the state on different things that we're doing. And so as you homestead, getting in with the agriculture network, I think is really important. As we wrap up Homesteading Part 2, we'll be doing Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, I'm sure. We want to remind you that we do make gourmet jams and jellies. We grow some of the ingredients for those, and we try to use Kentucky Proud products. We haven't really talked about why our jam is so special, but our jam, we like to, especially with our fruit jams, fruit is the first ingredient, y'all. You ain't buying sugar, you're buying fruit. And we're real proud of that. That's something that is kind of we can't really say somebody has patented saying fruit first, but we like to say that, when you look at the ingredients, indeed, fruit's first thing you eat. Fruit first. Our pepper jams, we have to do it a little bit different for state regulations to keep it acidified and safe. But our jams are really spectacular, y'all. They really are. Our blackberry bourbon, probably our most popular. Our strawberry moonshine, probably our second popular. We do blueberry and bourbon peach cobbler's coming up for summer, and it's really dreamy. It's really good in jam bars. So take a look at our website. That's friendsdriftin.com, and order up some jam. We do ship throughout the United States. They come in bright red gift boxes. We're real proud of that. We thank you all for tuning in. Subscribe below. When we get to 2,500 subscribers, we're going to start doing some live. We may do a few lives before then, but we thank you all. I'm Joyce.
I'm Charlie.
We're Friends Drift In. See you next week.